Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using the Boo-Ya stamp set from Lawn Fawn to create a fun Halloween card. Now I know what you're thinking, Halloween is 2 months away, exactly 2 months from today, the 31st, but you have to kind of start things early when you're a card maker, right? So I'm going to be making a couple Halloween cards over the next couple weeks, and I hope you guys enjoy them. So the first thing I did was I mounted the witch's hat, the cat ears, and the Bride of Frankenstein hair onto my compact stamp press. I just had them kind of separated apart so that I could have the ghost stamped underneath them. So I also stamped those head pieces onto masking paper. And I'm using masking paper because I want to protect those areas when I stamp the ghost shapes on top. So that's going to protect it and make it so it looks like all of these images are stamped seamlessly. The ink I'm using today is VersaFine Onyx Black, and I'm using this particular ink because I'm going to be doing some watercoloring, and this pigment ink, once dry, is bleed proof and waterproof. So I've stamped the ghost images, and I'm going to stamp on some cute faces. I love that there are multiple face options in this stamp set, so I'm using the one with the eyelashes over on the Bride of Frankenstein. I thought that would be perfect. I'm also adding on some additional elements onto each ghost. So I'm adding the cat's tail, as well as I'm going to add the witch's broom, and I'm also going to add a little Halloween treat bag onto the Bride of Frankenstein. And because I want those to look like they're in the hands of the ghosts, I masked off just the arms on each ghost and then stamped those pieces. And once everything was stamped, I added just a few more little elements. I've got a little spider that goes right there, and then I pulled off all of those masking pieces. I'm going to save these masks for another time since I did cut them out pretty precisely, and I'm just sticking them to the back of the stamp sheet because I think it's a great place to store those. So I'm going to lift off this witch's hat, and then you can see how perfectly everything was stamped. So I needed a string or a little stretch of spider web to come down from the spider or come up from the spider. So I used my T-square ruler and a black pen just to put a dash line. This pen is also waterproof. It's a Pilot envelope addressing pen. I'm using some drawing gum to protect the ghost images while I do my watercoloring on top. So I'm just using a paintbrush to paint on a really thin coat of drawing gum. The brush I'm using is one that I've dedicated to be used for drawing gum. Drawing gum can really mess up your brush, especially if you don't clean it out well enough. So I've just sort of dedicated this brush to drawing gum, and it's the one I always use when I need to add drawing gum or any sort of masking fluid to my projects. So I'm starting out with some mustard seed distress ink. I'm going to be adding a little bit of water to that ink and then doing some ink smushing today. So I'm adding just enough water to get that ink sort of more fluid, and then I'm picking it up with this sheet of acetate and bringing it over to my project and smushing it down onto the watercolor paper. So the reason why I love ink smushing with acetate like this is because you really have a lot of control over where the color is being applied. You still get that organic edge to all of the colors, but you have a little bit more visual control over where the colors are being applied. So it's really great for any of you who might have some control issues with watercoloring, just because it's so out of control. You don't know, you can't control it completely. I know that really bugged me at first, and then I really embraced the sort of randomness or chance of watercoloring. So you kind of have to get used to it. So this is a great way to sort of ease your way into watercoloring. So I used some Spice Marmalade, and now I'm using some Fired Brick. And then I'm moving on to Dusty Concord for the purple color. And then eventually I'll bring in some Black Soot. Colors I'm using today, I picked out in particular because I wanted some orange in there for Halloween, but I also wanted that intensity with the purple. So I thought this kind of transition between yellow to orange to red to purple to black would be a good combination for Halloween. So it's a little bit like Halloween colors, but a little bit more fresh, some bright colors. And I also wanted to keep it pretty bright, so I didn't add a ton of water to each of these colors before I brought them over to my project. Using my heat tool just to speed up the drying process. You don't have to use a heat tool. You could definitely just let it air dry. Then I'm taking my Distress spray bottle or sprayer bottle, and I'm just spraying on some water. So in the past, when I've done this particular technique where I add some water over the top of distress ink that has dried, I usually get a little bit more of a contrast with those water droplets after I pick them up with my paper towel. This time I didn't get a huge difference in color, and I suspect it was because perhaps the ink wasn't completely dry. I'm not entirely sure where I went wrong on this whole process here, but I think it might have been because it wasn't dry completely. So I used some more of that mustard seed and black soot and a brush and just flicked that off the edge of my palette for some ink splatter. Then I used a Xyron adhesive eraser to pull up that masking fluid. And you'll notice that a lot of the colors seeped underneath my stamp lines, and I couldn't figure out what I had done differently. I was trying to figure it out. I think possibly the drawing gum wasn't completely dry before I moved on to watercoloring. There's also that, or it could be that it was just a lot of color all at once. I'm not entirely sure what went wrong because I've done the same steps of watercoloring with distress ink over masking fluid in the past and have never had any problems. So now I'm going to add some color onto each of these ghosts. For the blush on their cheeks, I wet those areas with water first and then dropped in a little bit of worn lipstick distress ink. So it's just going to really soften out their cheeks, and it's going to be really cute. So to clean up some of those edges where that color seeped underneath, I'm using my Jelly Roll white pen, and I couldn't fix all of those edges, especially over on the Bride of Frankenstein. There was just a little too much purple coming in on those edges, but I did take my white pen and go around her hair. The hair was really dark and it was kind of getting lost with the black background, so I really wanted to make sure that it stood out. So I'm adding some powder twirl on top just to prep this area for some heat embossing. And then I stamped the Ghouls Night Out stamp from the stamp set into Versamark ink. Using Versamark because it's perfect for heat embossing. So while I have that Versamark out, I also did some additional stamping. I added a couple stars and then also a little talking bubble that says boo inside. I thought that'd be really cute. So I'm just adding a few little elements. So I'm going to add some white embossing powder on top. This is Hero Arts white embossing powder, and I wanted to stick to some of those areas, so I ended up using a dry brush just to brush off that stray embossing powder. And then I used my heat tool to heat set that until it was completely melted. So you'll notice that the beginning of Ghouls Night Out has no color behind it, and so you really couldn't see it. So I ended up adding some more ink smooshing right on top with some more mustard seed, and I also grabbed some more of that spiced marmalade to bring over on top of that as well. That's just going to add some color behind ghouls so that it's easier to read. And while I had my palette out with my paintbrush, I decided to add a little bit more color onto the cat. I just made the tail a little bit darker, and just to make it look a little nicer. This is also when I discovered that I had forgotten to paint the buckle on the witch's hat. So I added some more mustard seed for that. The card base I'm using today is made out of My Favorite Things steel gray cardstock. So I just scored that at 5.5 to create a side folding card. Or a top folding card, but it's a landscape card. And then I adhered that down with some Tombow Extreme adhesive. I added some sequins, and I'm just using some Ranger Multimedia Matte and also some tweezers just to pick those sequins up and then glue them down onto my card. So this card was really interesting. Like after I took off all that masking fluid, I didn't like how it looked. I almost redid the card, but I kept going, and I'm glad I did because even though it's a little bit messy in some spots, I think it turned out pretty cute. So this is just, an example of a card that I almost trashed but kept going with it. So sometimes when that happens to you, you just have to keep going because it can turn around and you can really like the card in the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. On on screen right now are 3 Halloween cards that I made last year. So if you want some more Halloween ideas, you can go ahead and check those out. You can catch me on social media at Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest, as well as Periscope. So if you're following me on Twitter, you can also follow me on Periscope. My name is Star of May on Periscope. Every once in a while I hop on for just a quick live chat. So if you want to catch me over there, you can. Thanks again for watching today's video, and I will catch you guys on Wednesday for another video.